All right. This episode of is brought to you by Mr. G. Wah. And we're going to wrap up the short arrangement of This Is My Father's World. In this episode, in this section, I'm going to be dealing primarily with writing the bass voices. For my arrangement, I wrote for a string quintet. Violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, and bass. I pretty much use the cello and the bass both as the bass voice. I like the octave thing. It just makes it very rich and very large and beautiful. It's kind of hard to get the full impact of it in the recording you're going to hear while I'm walking you through this process, because the voicings, the MIDI voices on MuseScore, the program I'm using to write with, aren't that great. But at the end of it, I will include a finished version of it with the voicings with the instrument samples that I got from Logic Pro, and you're going to hear a very big, rich, beautiful version of this. And you'll watch the score go by, and you'll hear the finished arrangement of it. And I think you'll agree it's pretty awesome. Now, one thought with this. Up until now, I haven't paid a whole bunch of attention to the chords that are originally associated with the melody. I wrote my cantus and my counterpoint really separate, for the most part, from the chordal guidelines of the tune. But when I write the bass part, I pay pretty strict attention to the chords that the melody come out of. And so the bass part is going to provide us with the, believe it or not, it's going to provide us with the chordal guidelines of the song. You're going to hear the chords because of the bass. Now, what's really interesting about this whole process is that if you do the counterpoint right and the cantus right, and you don't break a lot of the rules, and you do your dead level best to adhere to the voice leading concepts, you almost always end up with the right chord structure. It's really a fascinating process, and it's magical almost. But even if you don't end up with the chords that the song was written under, it still sounds good because you've obeyed the principles of voice leading and voice movement. But when I add the bass to it, you are going to really see this piece come alive. And I'm a bass player as a professional musician, and so I'm open to the accusation that I place too much emphasis on the bass, but so be it. I'm writing it. It's my arrangement. The bass is going to play a big part in it. On the B section, I did not do much modification of the cantus and the counterpoint. And I don't take you through the process I went through to write the cantus and the counterpoint for the B section, because you saw the process in the A section, and I wanted to not spend a whole bunch of time on that. Just know that I don't have them doing much in the B section, because I decided I wanted the B section to highlight the bass voice. And so there's a lot of movement in the bass voice, and the bass and the melody are kind of working with each other. And you'll see what that sounds like. I hope you enjoy it. God bless you. Mr. G out. Let's get going. All right, we're going to work on the A section of the song, the first part. We're going to write the bass voices now, and I am pretty much doubling the cello and a contrabass. It's going to end up being the same thing, an octave apart, and it gives it a real rich bottom heavy end. Now, what I'm going to be doing with the bass part is I'm going to center it almost exclusively around the written chords that go with this song. I'm not going to pay a whole bunch of attention yet onto what I've written here so far. I want to see what it's going to sound like if I just add the roots of the chords. So I'm going to just put this in here. Already done it. The chords are C. I'll do it in this voice. It's easy to hear. C, G, C, F, E, there's a G, there's an F. Pretty much working the chords. And as I started writing it, I started hearing things and I started adapting it. But I just want you to hear what I wrote so far. I'll let you hear what it sounds like. Let me turn it up where we can get to it. Here we go. With just the bass voices, with the bass voices added onto what we've done. There you are. Sounds beautiful, sounds rich, sounds full. Now, we could do some modification if I wanted to. Let me see here what I did here in this one. Nope, I didn't. Okay, let me just go back here then. Back up. Here we are. Is that the one we just did? Yes. My Father's World. There we are. All right. We could connect the dots here. I could go from C down to G. But you know what? There's a lot of motion art. There's stuff happening. I don't want this to clutter it up. I really want this, the bass part in this first part, to be a bed. So not a lot of movement. Notice I did go from like a G to an F. That's because this chord here is a G to a G7. Listen, I'm going to start here in this previous measure. Here's G, G7, and then to C. G with the B bass, F, C, G, and C. Now, the B section, notice I don't have a lot of movement happening in these inner voices. I chose to leave that and let them provide the sonic bed, if you will, and I decided I'm going to write a bass part that moves. So you have the bass part moving against the melody. So let me go find that here for you so you can see what that sounds like. Here we are. Make this up a little bigger so it's easier to see. Bam. All right. Now here is, you can look at this. Here we are. This, I'm making the bass move through the chords, and at this point it almost became a thing of what I was hearing in my head. I want the bass moving when the other part isn't moving. I want it still to outline the chords. For instance, this is a C. C, G, F, D, and then back to C again. And then here, that's an F chord. Right? We have an F, A, there's a C there. So I just did an F, C, G. And I connected from the C. So I go, here's a C chord. F, C, and then I'm walking down from a C down to an F. All right, so let's just listen. Again, this is what I heard in my head. And at this point in the process, I started to become a little bit inspired by what I was hearing. Now, let's back up a little bit. Notice I did something different here. Take a look at the comparison there. The measure before the B section, I just had C there, right? Well, take a look at this guy. I decided, everybody else is pretty much static. Let the basses move us into the next section. So I'm going to start right here. Listen. I'm going to work up my way up the C chord to bring us to the new section. Right there, that's cool. I decided I would mirror the melody. Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. Just, it's all unison. here. And then again, C, up to, working my way up to the G. So listen to that part again. Now listen to what I do here. Pretty slick. I like the way that turned out. And again, by this point, I'm starting to get a feel for the song. I've written the inner voices, and I've done a little bit of connecting. I've done a little bit of changing. You notice how I changed the viola part a little bit. Again, I did that to adapt to the changes the bass was bringing to me. So to recap real briefly, I start with the melody, which is my violin part here. By the way, there's no vibes. Don't know why that's there. I started with the violin part, and then I added my inner voices, just pure cantus firma. There we are, and counterpoint, single species counterpoint. I took that and I modified the inner voices a little bit, connected the dots a little bit, give us some motion, that's good, and then I added the bass part, and I used the chords that the song was written within as my structure to write the bass part. I didn't use the chords a whole bunch as a reference when I'm writing my inner voices. I let the parts take me where they're going to take me. When you're writing cantus firma and its counterpoint, if you follow the few basic rules, it writes itself. And then when you add the bass part, but make the bass part adhere to the chord structure of the song, you come up with some incredibly wonderful sounding sets of changes that you wouldn't think of, and some contrast and some dissonance and tension and release that you just wouldn't think of. And then what I did when I got toward the end of the song, by the way, then I got to the B section, I thought, let's feature our bass voices a little bit. And I had them going with the melody, playing with the melody. When possible, if the melody was stable, I had the bass part moving. For instance, here's the measure here, holding on a high C. So I had my bass parts moving here. Here, stable on a G. And I just had the bass part move down. So, and it turns out to be such a cool effect. And then when I get done with the end of this thing, here's the melody. Instead of it just ending on a full C chord, I employed what's called a plagal cadence. A plagal cadence is basically a 4 to a 1. I'm in the key of C, so you notice, basically, I have an F chord. F, A, C. The basses, I put a C in the bass. Again, the song would normally call for a C there, so I kept that. And then, as I resolve the plagal cadence from an F chord to a C chord, I let the bass voices bring back the first couple bars of the melody just to restate it. So here's what it sounds like. Plagal cadence to the end. Well, guess what? There you have it. We're not done yet. But what I've done here is I've written a piece of music that has all the essential parts for me to use where I want to turn this into a larger piece for public performance. I have all the parts. From the very beginning, I've written all the parts together. But guess what? I could split this up and extend this. I could just start with the melody by itself. It's a very pretty melody. Then I could bring in the two cantus firma, the two parts, the cantus and the counterpoint by itself and the whole notes. And then I could repeat the section with the busier parts. I could bring in the basses. You can expand this thing, gosh, to a full-fledged performance piece without any issues. But all the parts and pieces are here. Now what my job is I'm going to step back from this, and I'm going to leave it alone for a couple weeks. And then I will revisit it and see what it sounds like to me then. It sounds great to me now. But I'm kind of been sucked into this process and in this song I love the way it sounds. I love the way it turned out. But now I'm going to step back from it, and I'm going to come back in a couple weeks and see if there's anything more I would change, or if I want to expand this into a full-fledged performance piece. I might try writing it for a symphonic. Use this as a blueprint to write it for an entire orchestra, perhaps. There's all sorts of things. A choir. I could write it for a choir. So I'm just going to sit back and soak in it a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this for you, the finished version of it. I use Logic Pro. The samples of the instruments are much prettier. You'll hear everything very richly. And I want you just to listen to the music and watch the score as the music goes by. And with that, I'll leave you to it. Thank you for walking through this process with me. People ask me all the time, my students ask me, how do you do that? Well, you kind of got a glimpse of it. It's not an exact science. Composing is a matter of the heart. It's a matter of your imagination. And everybody does it different. But you got a glimpse about how I do it. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I hope you enjoy this finished version of This Is My Father's World. Mr. G out. Bye-bye.